your time is up, and we
have
another
this process.
Senator.
I think if we were waiting 6 months for one reply from the school, that has actually delayed the process.
I don't think that has delayed the process.
Senator,
please take your seat.
Please take your seat.
That's completely disingenuous.
The matter is concluded.
That's what I have.
Next item, Senator Pádraig McLaughlin, the need for the Minister for Education and Skills to make provision for the 30 pupils without a place on the buses to secondary schools in Buncrana, County Donegal. Senator, 4 minutes.
Minister, last Wednesday a delegation of Oireachtas members from Donegal met the Minister for School Transport, John Halligan, and we outlined to him the serious problems for pupils who have no school transport, almost 30 pupils from the Kilmacrennan and Termon areas who are going to the 2 secondary schools in Milford Town. We also outlined the problems where there are 9 children who do not have seats in the bus to Glenealy National School, which is in the North Inishowen area of Donegal. Minister Halligan has said that he's going to consider both issues, and hopefully he'll make an intervention and a recommendation, because Bus Éireann have made it clear to public representatives in Donegal they cannot provide any more buses under department and government rules that are in place. So Minister Halligan's to make a decision on that issue. But since then, we have discovered there's also a serious issue in the South Inishowen area. These areas of Burnfoot, Bridgend, Tubin and Muff. Those areas that are feeding in to the 2 or 3 secondary schools in Buncrana and County Donegal. 30 pupils in that area do not have seats on the school buses. All but 2 of them are eligible under department rules. So, around 28, 29 are eligible for school transport. Now, we had a public meeting in Muff in County Donegal there on Monday evening, and the parents that showed up outlined a range of reasons why the tickets were not secured. So there's clearly communications, understandings that have gone wrong. Similarly, there was a public meeting in Termon in County Donegal on Monday evening in relation to Milford School. And again, parents are reporting issues. There needs to be some flexibility here. Basically, what I'm saying to you is in the South Inishowen area now, we have around 30 pupils. Going into the Milford area, about 30 pupils. Glenealy and North Inishowen, there's 9. That's a large number of pupils and parents who are seriously disadvantaged. We talk about keeping people in rural communities, yet we're not giving them the supports they need in terms of school transport. Most of these families are working families that have fixed hours. They have to make arrangements. This is a real big problem for these families. Something's gone wrong this year. There's also an issue, Minister, I would say to you, in preparing ahead. Surely in post-primary schools, we can have a sense of the numbers that are going to be needing school transport by contacting the primary schools that feed into the secondary schools. That's not a huge task. To prepare properly, to know the numbers of buses, to understand that sometimes communications can go wrong, deadlines can be missed, but we can't leave people lying at the side of the road or standing at the side of the road in this case without the proper transport. So, Minister, I'm asking, and I have emailed your colleague, Minister John Halligan, last night in terms of South Inishowen. He has all the facts in terms of Glenealy. He has all the facts in terms of Milford. He will have all the details in terms of South Inishowen. He needs to make an intervention. We cannot leave that number of pupils, of school children and parents behind. Can't do that. It's totally unfair.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, and thanks very much. And I'm taking this on behalf of Minister Bruton and Minister John Halligan. So I want to thank you, Senator, for raising the matter. And before I address the specific answers raised, I would like to give members of the House an outline of the extent of the school transport service. So from 2017 to 2018, over 117,000 children, including over 12,000 children with special educational needs, are transported in approximately 4,500 vehicles. on a daily basis to primary and post-primary schools, and that covers over 200 million kilometres annually to a total cost of 190 million. Parental contributions towards the cost were 15.4 million in 2017, with the remainder paid for by the state. Children are generally eligible for school transport if they satisfy the distance criteria and they're attending the nearest school. Children who are eligible for school transport and who have completed the application process on time have been accommodated on school transport services for the current year where such services are in operation. Children who are eligible for school transport but for whom no transport service is available may, following an application for transport within the prescribed time limits, receive a remote area grant towards the cost of private transport arrangements. Children who are not eligible for school transport may apply for transport where spare seats are available after eligible children have been accommodated. This is referred to as concessionary transport. Where the number of ineligible children exceeds the number of spare seats available, Bus Éireann will allocate tickets for the spare seats using an agreed selection process. Under the terms of the scheme, the number of spare seats varies from year to year based on the capacity of the buses running on all of the various routes and the number of eligible children accommodated on each route. Hence, there is no guarantee that a non-eligible child who received a place in the previous year will receive a seat the following year, nor is there a guarantee that a sibling of a non-eligible child who receives a ticket will receive a seat. It is included in the terms and conditions on Bus Éireann online application that availability of seats may vary from year to year and that concessionary transport cannot be guaranteed for the duration of a child's education. Under the terms of the scheme, routes will not be extended or altered, additional vehicles will not be introduced, nor will larger vehicles or extra trips using existing vehicles be provided to cater for children who are not eligible, or no additional state cost will be incurred in covering the cost of providing school transport for children who are not eligible. A total of over 74,000 children who are eligible for school transport and who completed the application process on time have been issued with tickets for school transport services for 2018-2019. Further, 1,100 children who are eligible for school transport but who were late in submitting their payment details were unsuccessful in obtaining seats on school transport services as buses are operating to capacity. In addition, over 27,500 children who are not eligible for school transport and who paid by the deadline date have been issued with concessionary tickets for school transport. Some 350 children who are not eligible for school transport and who paid by the deadline date were unsuccessful in obtaining concessionary seats on school transport services in 2018 and 2019 as buses are operating in capacity. The situation referred by you, Senator, relates to a number of children whose payment was not received on time and a further number who are not eligible for school transport. As the services in the area are operating at capacity, it will not be possible to accommodate them on school transport services.
You have 1 minute, Senator.
Minister, that response is completely unacceptable to me and every other public representative in Donegal. In terms of the specifics of the South Inishowen area, I say again, we're talking about 30 pupils with families from rural areas serving into the Buncrana secondary schools who do not have a seat in the bus. And in the cases that we have looked at, through no great fault of their own, issues with medical cards, issues with communication, that is completely unfair. Now, you said some. All but 2, so that's about 28 out of 30, are eligible for school transport. Under your own rules, they're entitled to school transport. And I'm saying that the Minister needs to intervene to look at this case. Milford, You know, we're talking here about 29 pupils. 21 of them are eligible. I understand some of them have special needs. We cannot leave those families behind. 9 school children in Glenealy. That is completely unacceptable, that response. And it's not in keeping with what Minister John Halligan said to us last Wednesday. Last Wednesday, the Oireachtas members who were present left hopeful that there might be a solution, that there could be an intervention because of the number of eligible students. Now, eligible versus concessionary is a matter for debate because, you know, you could have a situation where for some reason in a rural area they're about, 100 metres closer to a school in another town. They've traditionally gone to, for example, in this case, they've gone to the schools in Milford. They might be now 100 metres closer to a school in Letterkenny, but they're being punished for that. So that's the issue of eligible versus concessionary. But in terms of this issue, going by your own rules now, we have about 50 pupils who are eligible for school transport who are being left behind. That is unacceptable to me and any other public representative worth their salt in Donegal. So I'm asking now that I appreciate the Department of Education officials wrote this response that you're delivering today. I'm asking you to speak to Minister John Halligan and to honour the understanding that we had last Wednesday. That's critical now at this stage.
Sure. I hear what you're saying, and I will make sure that Minister Bruton and Minister Halligan hear the concerns that you've raised and what the group that you brought to meet Minister Halligan, and I'll ask him to revert specifically to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Minister. Before we adjourn, I have a message from Dáil Éireann. Dáil Éireann has passed the Markets and Financial Instruments Bill 2018 on the 25th of September 2018, to which agreement of Seanad Éireann is desired. Is that agreed? That's all. Okay. Senator, we propose suspension of the House till 11:30. Agreed. Okay. Thanks, Minister. Thank you.
What's proposed for today?
Margaret Lasker, the order of business today, Wednesday, September 26, 2018. The order of business is items 1 to 2 and motion 7014 on the order paper. Item 1, Copyright and Other Intellectual Property Law Provisions Bill 2018. Second stage, to be taken at 12:45 p.m. and to be adjourned no later than 2 p.m. if not previously concluded, with the time allocated to group spokespersons not to exceed 8 minutes and all other senators not to exceed 5 minutes. Item 2, Judicial Appointments Commission Bill 2017, committee stage resumed, to be taken at 2 p.m. and to be adjourned at 5 p.m. if not previously concluded. And motion 7014, private members' business, to be taken at 5 p.m. with the time allocated to this debate not to exceed 2 hours.
Thank you, Leader. Senator Mark Daly.
Thank you, Lasker Hirlock. And we read about the predictions of growth from the ESRI and that it will be near 10%, depending on who's doing the numbers. And then yesterday we had the UN Human Development Index showing that Ireland had jumped from 8th in the world to 4th in the world in terms of health, education, income, which of course is to be welcomed in terms of life expectancy, educational attainment, and in terms of the issues of health and people who are earning wages. But what we also see on the reverse end of that scale is homelessness and housing as an ongoing issue, and yet the government are blaming others other than themselves, and they don't seem to have a plan. Sorry, they have plenty of plans because we've seen how many times they've announced them, but they don't have plans that they actually implement, and no one is being held to account for that, although the blame seems to be transferred from the department down to the local authorities. So what we would like to see is the real plan and the real figures, and the department continually issue figures which have been challenged on the media by Dr. Larkin, Sir, and others, where they actually show that while the government are portraying houses as being built, it's often just houses being reconnected to the electricity system that were previously turned off. And the department know this. They know that they're giving false figures. And we can't even get them to admit the truth until they're found out by experts. I'd also like to bring in another issue in relation to the human tissue bill, which the Minister for Health has announced, again, 13 years after it was first announced. The human tissue bill is coming in. And this idea of presumed consent, that every one of us is an organ donor unless we opt out. And there's going to be a very expensive system whereby we would all opt out if we didn't want to be an organ donor. Hasn't worked anywhere else in the world, doesn't work effectively, doesn't work at all, really. And Mark Murphy, the CEO of the Irish Kidney Association, who is an expert in this area, has said time and time again, this idea of presumed consent, right, but also, even though you have a registry and everything, that the family would still be consulted as to whether or not that our loved one would be an organ donor, means it actually really isn't presumed consent. And then they talk about it as a soft opt-out. All done to distract from the fact that the health system isn't even working properly and we have so many people on trolleys. I suppose that might be a brief respite for the Minister. But what we have is a system, where we already collect the information as who does and does not want to be an organ donor in the driving licence. And in May, we had the Minister for Transport in here and explained to him, although he wasn't aware, that he already shares data on people's driving licences with private companies like eFlow and people who are doing clamping and with the court services. And yet he does not allow the health service to access the information that is in the driving licence registry of who does and does not want to be an organ donor. That's a simple systems failure. Like our organ donation system itself, where we spend hundreds of millions every year on dialysis, and yet if we had proper systems like allowing health professionals to inform families because they were able to contact the driving licence authority and say, actually, your son or daughter did want to be an organ donor, we have a copy of their driving licence. It helps inform families of their loved ones' intentions. And yet, that simple change to the system isn't being done. However, the Minister is proposing a grandiose opt-out system that will cost millions, and yet the family will still have a veto, as they should. Does that sound like a system that's working, or that a system we should have? when we have a driving licence system already there that checks every 10 years whether or not someone wants to be an organ donor. We, by the way, in a 10-year period, will spend over $1 billion on dialysis. And yet, if we had a proper functioning organ donation system, we would not only save money, we would save lives. Thank you,
Thank you, Senator. Senator Victor Boyne.
I'd like to ask the Leader a number of items. And firstly, I'd like if we could have some, in the near future, not necessarily in the next week or so, but in the very near future, if we would have a debate in the House in relation to housing. And I'm not going to rehash all the arguments that were in the Dáil yesterday in the debate, but what we can say is we have 31 local authorities. We have 10,000 people in emergency housing. 3,600 of those are children. And we have over 100,000 householders on our housing waiting list. That's one side of the problem. The other side is we have thousands and thousands of people that cannot afford to either purchase or to rent a home. And many of those thousands of people are actually working, and their couples working too, so they've combined incomes, and they still cannot afford to purchase, and they still cannot afford to rent. And the whole issue, of course, is increase the supply and have affordability. Affordability to purchase, affordability to rent. So I think we should have a debate within this House on it. Second, I'd like to bring up the issue that my colleague, Independent TD Tommy Brewin, in response to a question last week in the Dáil and was replied to by the Minister, Catherine Sapone, that there are over 900 vacancies in Tusla. Tusla has confirmed there are 900 positions vacant, and currently they are spending $2.5 million on average a month to bring in locums and various people to supplement their staff. That's a frightening figure. And I am very supportive of Catherine Sapone and her work and her commitment to reform Tusla. It's an organisation that we all know needs reform. And I would ask the Leader at some point if we could arrange maybe the Minister to look again at all of that and to come back in here at some stage, and maybe we might have statements on Tusla, but specifically in relation, not the bigger picture, because Tusla is such a big organisation, but in relation to the resources and these 900 vacancies that she's confirmed herself to the lower house. And finally, a number of county councils and city councils have been on to me in relation to the pyrite and the pyrite resolution board, and more importantly about pyrite redress, because that seems to be the big issue for a lot of people. And this is a big and a major problem if you suffer or you have a home where it's affected by pyrite. And I'm not 100% sure what is the actual current position in relation to the resolution board, or what is the government's current policy about it. But I think it'd be important, Leader, if you wouldn't mind getting the relevant minister who has overall responsibility for this particular area maybe to come to the House and make a statement and update the members on the status of the Pyrite Resolutions Board, but more importantly, how they propose, or the government proposed, to put in place a meaningful and appropriate redress scheme for those people involved. Thank you.
Senator Rose Conway-Walsh.
And I too would like to support the calls for the Minister. That's Minister English. He's the relevant Minister who's working on the pyrite issue. And I would ask you, Leader, if you'd ask him to come into the House. I had a commencement notice put in for today on the pyrite issue, but it didn't get accepted. It is hugely important that the hundreds of families, particularly across Mayo and Donegal, who are affected by this know where they stand, and they are keenly looking to the budget to have a redress scheme there put in place, as was promised by Minister English. So if that could be done this week, I would really appreciate it. Also, Cahirlach Boalam Coveroni of La Clan Tomaloy, Kjolthor Intuk, Os Mulrani in Condawio, for both on Shockton Shakacha. I want to pay tribute to Tom Malloy from the Malloy brothers, who are traditional Irish musicians from Mulranny in County Mayo. Now, Tom and his brothers are renowned, and they have performed in many venues across Ireland and England and throughout the world. And indeed, they played for John Lennon as well when John Lennon came to County Mayo in 1969. They played the Leaving of Liverpool for him. And it's timely that this weekend that Ballina is hosting the Other Voices and Music sessions in this prestigious event in the music calendar, and I want to wish everybody in Ballina well for that weekend. But it was pioneers such as Tom that helped place the Irish traditional music at the centre of the folk revival. They helped to showcase Irish music across the world. So my sincere condolences to his wife Geraldine, to his sons Enda and to Thomas and his daughter Elizabeth. The service they did for County Mayo and for the music industry as a whole, I think, will never be forgotten. And it wasn't only just that, but it was their kindness in always accepting to do charitable events. And I know even from my time in England, it was always a pleasure to come across the Malloy brothers and Tom Malloy. You know, they did what they did with joy in their hearts, and they showed kindness wherever they went. Finally, Cathaoirleach, I want to highlight the programme on TG Cahir tonight on Finney for telling the story of the death of another Mayo man, Mayo hunger striker, Frank Stagg. Now, Frank's brother, George, recounts how Frank's last days and how his body was hijacked by the Irish government after coming here. You'll remember he thought he was coming into Dublin Airport and they had been diverted to Shannon, and Frank's body was taken away from them. But it tells a real personal story behind that, and I want to commend as well Pat Kenny for the interview he did yesterday morning on News Talk with George Stagg, telling the story, because I think it's a story that needs to be told and needs to be told in its context. And one of the lines that really struck me was when George was describing, he was asked the question of, was it worth it, or, would he do it again? And then he described how Frank had been influenced by the Ballymurphy massacre and by internment and what had happened in the north. And just because Frank was from Mayo didn't mean that he was any less affected by what had happened there and saw the need to fight back because of the injustices such as the injustice in Ballymurphy. And I really want to commend TG Cahir for their bravery in highlighting a lot of these issues and for putting on this. And I would urge people just to have a look at it and judge for themselves tonight. It's on after 9 o'clock on TG Cahir.
Thank you, Senator Lynn Ruane. And congratulations again on your very successful book launch.
Thank you very much.
Great night in Trinity.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. I would like today to raise the case of Sean Binder. Sean is 24 years old from Toker in County Cork and was a classmate of mine in Trinity College. For the past year, Sean has been working for an international NGO, the Emergency Response Centre International, on the island of Lesbos in Greece, where he has been coordinating search and rescue activities to provide emergency assistance to incoming refugees landing on the island. In August, Sean was arrested by the Greek authorities and now stands accused of involvement in human trafficking, money laundering, espionage and membership of a criminal organisation, and now faces a potential 20 years in prison. Sean denies all the charges against him and is being held in a Greek prison where his family and friends are deeply concerned for his safety, and where he can currently be held for up to 18 months without being charged or sent to trial. His mother Fanny has launched a public campaign calling on the Irish state to exert any pressure and influence to guarantee her son's safety, which is a call I hope we can all support. This is a young man who has lived his life in Ireland, graduated from university here in Dublin, and following his studies decided to travel to Greece and dedicate his time and energy to literally pulling refugees from the Mediterranean onto dry land. We have a responsibility to ensure the safety and security of this young man, and Leader, I'd like to ask you to communicate to the Taoiseach the urgency with which this case needs to be treated, and ask for an update on any consular efforts or progress that has been made. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you very much, Senator. Senator Maria Byrne.
Thanks very much indeed, Cathaoirleach. I rise today, Leader, to raise the issue to do with the temporary absence of pharmacists from Pharmacy Rules 2018 that's currently, I know, with the Minister for Health. Basically, I suppose the pharmaceutical assistants, the last cohort of students that were taken into this course was back in 1985. So that means that many of these pharmaceutical assistants, and they're predominantly women, 95% of them are women actually, and there's about 300 people involved in this. Currently, they're employed in pharmacies right across the country. And in the temporary absence of the pharmacist, they're entitled to cover the pharmacy for maybe 2.5 days at a time, or, to cover lunch hours when the pharmacist has actually gone on their lunch break. Under the current proposals that's before the Minister from the Irish Pharmaceutical Society, they can only cover up to 1 hour per day. If the pharmacist goes out sick currently, the pharmaceutical assistant can actually cover that day for the pharmacy. Under the current legislation that's being proposed, or changes to the legislation, which is in place since 1994, is when it was last amended. Under the current changes, they would not be able to cover, and the pharmacy possibly would have to close down, because they can only cover up to 1 hour per day. Many of these women have over 30 years' experience, and the last, I suppose, of the cohorts are in their late 50s. So it's not like that there's an awful lot of them who are left to come through the system to reach retirement age. At the moment, they're not covered by the fitness to practice, and they're also not covered to continue their education. But yet these pharmaceutical assistants choose to go to the further education courses that are run for both pharmacists and pharmaceutical assistants, and many of them avail of the choice of doing this of their own will. But it's not compulsory for them. The Pharmaceutical Union, who the pharmaceutical assistants are not members of, have actually supported the pharmaceutical assistants in their plight, and have written to the Minister to ask him to work in a more cohesive manner, and that maybe the Pharmaceutical Society should be asked to go back and to reconsider to develop a core competency framework for pharmaceutical assistants similar to that which applies to pharmacists, to bring them under the Fitness to Work banner, and also to make it compulsory that they attend the continuing education courses. And such actions will provide the necessary assurance to the PSI Council and to the public of the competence, knowledge and skills of pharmaceutical assistants. And pharmaceutical assistants will be able to continue to act safely in the temporary absence of a pharmacist under the current conditions. And this certainly is something that's really, really important, because we all go into pharmacies, I suppose, on at least a weekly basis, certainly, and we never know at the moment if we're dealing with the pharmacist or the pharmaceutical assistant. But the fact that they have over 30 years' experience has to stand for something, and certainly it's something, Leader, that I'd like to raise with you, that you might be able to bring to the attention of the Minister, because it does affect every county and every city in Ireland. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Terry Lane.
I'd just like to refer to the European Parliamentary Constituency Committee, the report on the European Parliament Constituency 2018. The situation is that, as you know, there is a proposal to increase the number of seats from 11 to 13. But when you see the map, the obvious place, with respect to our Secretary Clerk here, for an increase in the number of members would be in the Midland North West, which had 4 and has 4. But yet, the members elected there should take on responsibility for representing the people of Northern Ireland, who will be defranchised when the United Kingdom proposed to leave the European Union. So I felt it would have been appropriate if that area would have been allocated 2 extra seats. Because if you're...
Sorry.
Pardon?
I couldn't hear you. Which area?
Sorry, the Midland North West. That's adjoining from Louth to Donegal, which is adjoining the border with Monaghan, Cavan and into Leitrim. That it would be appropriate that those members elected from that constituency would represent the best interests of the people of Northern Ireland, of all denominations and none. And I felt that the Commission, with respect, should have took that into account. But obviously they didn't. They did not increase the numbers from 4 to 5. They increased from Dublin from 3 to 4 and the South from 4 to 5. It's a long way from Belfast to Cork. It's not a long way from Belfast to Dundalk. So I just feel that when the legislation is drawn up, the government should bear this in mind and take into consideration this situation. Because I believe the people of Northern Ireland are entitled to representations in the European Parliament, in the European Union, after the British United Kingdom decide to leave, even though Northern Ireland voted to stay. And furthermore, an interesting point about this is that the seats, the before the 2 extra seats, or the 2 members can actually take their seats in the new European Parliament after May 2019, it will be subject to the actual withdrawal, legally, of the United Kingdom from the European Union. So technically speaking, the 11 seats will stand until the United Kingdom actually legally leave the European Union, which may not actually be for 5 years. We don't know. But obviously they're not contesting at this point in time. The United Kingdom have decided to withdraw in March 2019 in advance of the European elections of 2019 in May. So I just feel, and I just say this to the people who will be elected, whether it's 4 or 5 from the constituency of the border constituencies, I call it, Ulster and the Connaught, that whoever is elected there should be part of their commitment, and that's irrespective now, because I know that this will be accepted by the government as have all previous recommendations. But I would say to those members who are elected that they will pledge to support the people of Northern Ireland, that they will be available to the people of Northern Ireland to put their views to the European Union, to be available to go into that northern area, to represent them and to meet them throughout the whole length and breadth of Northern Ireland. And that's, I feel, a commitment that any candidate should go, and I'll put that up to the candidates now. If they're going for nomination, put that as their pledge, that they will equally support our divided brotherhood in Northern Ireland as one united Ireland represented by them in the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Gabrielle McFadden.
I rise today to raise the plight of assistant psychologists in Ireland. Assistant psychologists in Ireland have studied for 3 years for their undergrad, and most of them pay about €10,000 to do their masters. They then become an assistant psychologist, but they don't get paid work. In order to get paid work, they have to go on and do a clinical doctorate. But to get on a clinical doctorate course, you have to have experience. So these young people are then forced to work for nothing. Now, I know a young lady who works 5 days a week in a local business for the minimum wage, and then works 2 days a week free of charge as an assistant psychologist. So this lady is working 7 days a week for the minimum wage. Most of these jobs are obviously in Dublin, so she's travelling from the country to Dublin for 2 days a week, putting petrol in her car and having to stay overnight to work for, as I say, the minimum wage. And I don't think it's good enough. She uses the small few bob she gets from the local business to fund her working. I believe very strongly that there is no trainee psychiatrist in this country ever asked to do this, and I don't think it's fair and equal that a psychologist would do it. The waiting lists, as we all know, are very long for people that are suffering with mental health issues, which, as well as that, puts pressure on GPs, which we know they're struggling. So there are also, I have to say, educational difficulties and waiting lists for children with educational difficulties. So there's a clear need for clinical psychologists in this country, and I would ask the leader that perhaps the minister would be invited in to have a discussion on this issue. I don't think it's fair that young people that pay for college and study hard end up having to work for free of charge. And with that, I'd like to welcome the children that are in the public gallery. You never know, some of them one day might be an assistant psychologist, and perhaps maybe when that time comes, they'll be paid for their efforts. Gur Mahagat.
I wanted to bring up, Leader, today the Public Sector Pay Commission. And in particular for today, I suppose, as the Psychiatric Nurses Association and the INMO are meeting to discuss the Public Sector Pay Commission and to figure out why or how we can correct over 2,000 vacancies throughout the nursing profession across this land. The Public Sector Pay Commission said there's no issue with nursing recruitment. But this is completely inaccurate and misleading. The dogs in the street know they're an issue. The staff at the coalface know it's an issue. And the patients know it's an issue. Take psychiatry alone, our mental health that's talked about so much. The latest audit of the nursing vacancies, that unfulfilled nursing posts in mental health is growing, and there are 700 posts vacant in that speciality alone. That's nearly 200 vacancies since last year, in the last audit was done. There's 88 vacancies in St Aida's, there's 76 vacancies in St James's, in Dublin North City there's 56, Galway 62, Louth, Meath 46 and so on. The Pay Commission has completely ignored the scale of mounting recruitment and retention crisis facing our entire health services, and retirements projected for over the next 5 years will put further pressure on already a broken system. The conclusion of the Pay Commission that there is no issue with nurse recruitment is completely at odds with the evidence and experience of nurses and patients across the services. The reality is that there are ongoing vacancies, in some cases as high as 25%, impacting daily on delivery of health services. In particular, the staff shortages in child and adolescent mental health services are well documented, as the excessive and expensive reliance on overtime and agency nurses throughout our services. Nurses argue that it is unsustainable, this staff shortages, and can be best addressed by a pay rise for the grade, across the grade. Can the leader ask for a debate with the Minister about the Public Service Commissions and why they rejected across the board pay rises in a much needed services for the health of our nation? They cannot ignore, and they have ignored, the mounting recruitment and retention issue. Gurmagat.
Thank you very much, Senator. Senator Tim Lombard.
This afternoon, at this stage, I'd like to, congratulate the actual communities around Ireland that were involved in the Tidy Towns competitions. These are our volunteers that have done such Trojan work in every village and town in Ireland, and obviously it was a national winner from Mayo. But my part were towns like Kinsale and Clonakilty retained their gold medal, and Bandon obviously got a bronze medal this year, which is very, very important. But the work that these groups need to be acknowledged, I think they are our true volunteers, they're true heroes of the community. They go out there to ensure that our towns and villages are looking so well, and the knock-on effect is that the communities get support, whether it's tourism, whether it's industry. The knock-on effect that these people are our true heroes, and we should acknowledge it. The other issue that I'd like to raise, Chairman, is an issue that happened at the Education Committee meeting yesterday regarding the school bus service. I think we have a colleague here in the Chamber who was at that meeting.